Some people are surprised that a priest could have been in the Marine Corps. And there are a couple ways I answer that question. Some of you might know the first verse of the Marine Corps hymn from the halls of Montezuma. But the third verse, I won't sing it for you because I haven't had a glass of red wine. Then I might sing it for you. Explains the whole thing. It goes like this. Here's health to you and to our corps, which we are proud to serve. In many a strife, we fought for life and never lost our nerve. If the Army and the Navy ever look on heaven's scenes, they will find the streets are guarded by United States Marines. So there it is. That's the connection. Isn't the role of the priest to help people get to heaven? Yes, that's it. All right. Look, let's start with some audience participation. How about that? So if Father Peter, this is for a grade, this is for extra credit. This is for 10 extra points. If Father Peter said to you, I want you to summarize, or Father Tom said to you, I want you to summarize the gospel for me, the gospel of Jesus Christ, in one word. In just one word, what would that word be? Love is a very good word. How about something else? Truth is a very good word. Let's have some more. Don't be afraid. Sacrifice is a magnificent word. Beautiful. Let's keep going. Jesus, that's a hard word to beat. They're cheating. That's called cheating. That's fine. No, it's a good word. Selflessness. That's nice. Yes? Passion. Good. Perseverance. Grace is a good word. Anybody else? Ma'am? Faith is a good word. Okay. One or two more. Mercy. Hope. All right. All excellent words. Now, if you ask me that word, Father Czech, former tank commander of the Marine Corps, what is your one word? My word is joy. The mission of Jesus Christ is the restoration of lost joy. That is the purpose of the gospel. Why do I say that? Because Jesus did. How many of you have a New Testament in your room? Come on, all hands ought to go up. All right. And not just because it's online, because you take it out in a book and you look at it. All right. Tonight, go to John chapter 15, which is sometimes called part of the farewell discourse, our Lord's final words of instruction and encouragement to the apostles. And in John 15 he said, I have told you these things that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. I have told you these things. I have preached the kingdom to you, we could say, so that the joy that is mine will be yours, that my joy may be in you and may be complete. Now, these things, do we have some English majors in the room? How many English majors do we have? No English majors? One English major there. A couple, good. My mother is an English teacher, so when we had dinner at night, Mom, Dad, my famous brother, and my other brother, we used to talk about things like antecedents. You know what an antecedent is? English majors? Oh, come on. So an antecedent is something that went before to tell us what the pronoun is. These things. I have told you these things, Jesus said. What's the antecedent for that? Well, we go to the previous verse, and this is what he says. I have kept the Father's commandments, and I abide in his love. Now you keep the commandments and abide in his love. I have told you these things that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. I think in Jesus' mind, there were three things that he wanted to connect. Joy, love, and the commandments. Now the first two are no problem for us. Everybody wants joy. Does anybody in the room not want joy? Everybody wants joy. Love, we're here actually to talk about love tonight. Everybody wants that. But what about the commandments? Maybe not so much, Father. That sounds like something I can't do, that I might like to do. And besides, this is 2015 in the United States of America. And no one's going to tell me what I shouldn't do. All right. Commandments. It's a hard word. Let's see if we can look at it another way. St. Thomas Aquinas, when he was studying his moral theology, and he looked at the commandments, of course, instead of thinking of the thou shalts and thou shalt nots, he listed the 10 commandments according to the virtues. The virtues. What's a virtue? Do you remember that scene in the gospel where the woman who is suffering from something that's troubling her very much, a hemorrhage, goes up behind Jesus, touches his cloak, and is healed? Everybody remember that story? And in the gospel it says, and Jesus felt the power go out of him, and she's healed. Now, there was a very famous saint in the early church, his name was Saint Jerome, and he translated all of the Bible into Latin. We call it the Vulgate. And in that section in particular, the word that he used for power, and Jesus felt the power go out of him, is the word in Latin for virtue, virtus. So some of the older English translations say, and Jesus felt the virtue go out of him. Now that seems odd to our ears, right? We don't want to lose virtue. But the point is, a virtue is a power. It's a power. What's it a power for? For expressing our humanity. And in the context of our conversation, it's a power for loving well. Loving well. So remember the commandments, 2 tablets? The first 3 have to do with loving God. And the second tablets, 4 through 10, have to do with loving neighbor. I have told you these things that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. I have kept the Father's commandments and abide in his love. Now you keep those commandments and love well, Jesus says. Let's go through the commandments very quickly to see these powers that will help us love well. Everybody knows the first commandment. We should love the Lord our God with all of my heart, soul, and strength, not have strange gods before him. St. Thomas would call that the virtue of fidelity, or let's you and I call it tonight spiritual childhood. Doesn't Jesus say you can't enter the kingdom of heaven except as you become like children? Does that mean we go back into our mother's womb and we're 5 years old? And no. It means that we are God's children. And we listen to him and we love him and we look to him as our Father. As our Father. So, someone's going to take notes on this. Who's going to take notes on this and send it around? What's your name? Katie's going to take notes and send this around later so you can all have the virtues. Spiritual childhood. Number 2 is reverence. So the second commandment is not to take the name of the Lord God in vain. Reverence his name. Or when Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. Doesn't he always reverence other people? Does he ever hurt anyone? No. He shows them great reverence and respect. So the virtue of the second commandment is reverence for the other. Doesn't everyone want to be reverenced? Yes, it's a sign of our understanding that there's another person there. The third commandment is the virtue of service. The most important service that you and I render to God is to worship him in the way that he has asked us. And as Catholics, that happens at the Holy Mass. St. Thomas More, isn't he your patron? St. Thomas More, of the diocese I'm talking about, he was at Mass one day and he got a message from the king. Okay, it didn't come through on one of these because he didn't have that. Right? He didn't have that, but he had an Android. He had an iPhone, he had an Android. There it is. So a message came, a written note from the king saying, Sir Thomas, this was before he was imprisoned and ultimately was martyred, and he was still the chancellor of the realm, and the king said, I need you at the palace right away. And so someone handed him the note during Mass, and he read it, and he said, I am on service to the King of Kings, and I will come when Mass is over. Service to God. Fourth commandment is the virtue of pietas in Latin. We translate it in English as piety. How are we doing over there, Katie? Pietas, piety. Piety, we think of Eucharistic piety, Marian piety. You've heard those expressions. They're devotion to the Eucharist and to Our Lady. But pietas is something else. It's that honor, devotion, and respect that we owe to someone who has authority in our life. And while we're on our Latin quiz, by the way, authority comes from a Latin word that means to build up. Authority is supposed to be service. Everyone who is in a position of authority is to serve other people. So, pietas, reverence for those who are in authority over us. The fifth commandment is the virtue of meekness. which sounds like weakness, but it's not. It's that strength or virtue or power that controls that tendency that I have to want to lash out or promote myself or say things that might hurt someone, either verbally or perhaps physically. So meekness, controlling sinful anger. The 6th commandment, which is going to be some of our conversation tonight, is the virtue of chastity. The 7th commandment, how are we doing, Katie? The virtue of justice, to render someone else their due. That's D-U-E, not D-E-W or D-O, but their due, what they're owed, right? The 8th commandment, St. Thomas would call the virtue of veracity, or we'll call it truthfulness, truth-telling. The 9th commandment is purity of heart. And the 10th commandment is temperance. Those are virtues. Don't those sound a little bit nicer than commandments, thou shalt and thou shalt not? St. Thomas was a very wise man, and he located our capacity to love in these special powers called virtues. And we're all interested in virtues because we see them in other people. I think you should ask yourselves, who are the people that I admire, and why do I admire them? And once we move past, I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan. Okay, I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. All real people who like football like Green Bay Packers. Right? But as much as I admire Aaron Rodgers, I admire him for his professional competence. I don't know, I hope he's a good Christian man, he may very well be. But when we move past the sports figures and the rock stars and the people who have a lot of money and power and influence in the world, the people that we admire are virtuous people. We're made for people who sacrifice themselves. I worked for a man in the Marine Corps who, in the Vietnam War, had thrown himself on a hand grenade to save his buddies. Now, fortunately, it was a dud. It didn't go off. He never talked about it, but all the Marines in the command knew what he had done. Didn't our Lord throw himself on death for us? And our love for him is so great because we see not only did he talk to us, but he made that sacrifice. That's what the virtues do. All right. Let's talk a little bit more, particularly now, about love and the capacity to love well, and why the virtue of chastity is more than just restraint. It sounds like what we are not doing. Isn't that right? We're abstaining from something. But actually, chastity has that component of holding us back from doing something that would hurt ourselves or hurt someone else. But there's much more that's involved in that. It's recognizing that that other person is created in the image and likeness of God, and that God in his wisdom has shown us a way to express affection in this unique aspect of the human condition. Why is it unique? Well, let's think about it like this. I do a lot of traveling for my job, and I give talks to groups of people like this from time to time. It's a great blessing for me and my priesthood. But when I get on the airplane and I go back home, the airplanes, the airlines these days, they don't feed you very much. You know, you get a peanut or two about this big. And when you've been traveling all day and you're hungry, that doesn't quite do it for you. Now, when I get home, the cook who takes care of the priest where I live and prepares meals knows that for me, two of the essential food groups are chocolate cake and red wine. Chocolate cake and red wine. So she knows I'm coming back from a trip. And I haven't had any dinner, so it's 10 o'clock and I get back to the rectory and there's a chocolate cake and there's a bottle of Cabernet. I probably shouldn't be saying this to college students. When I went to college a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, in 1977, 18 years old, you could still drink on the campus. So it was a little different day, and maybe things are better today. But in any case, I'm not scandalizing you. I don't want to scandalize you. So here, I'm going to get into the rectory. What am I going to do? Very hungry. Let me pour that tall glass of red wine. Let me have that nice big piece of chocolate cake. Let me enjoy myself. Now here's the problem. The next morning, Sick stomach, headache.
Oh.
Yes, because I've enjoyed myself just a little bit too much. I have stepped outside a reasonable limit for chocolate cake and red wine. Now, here's my question to you, friends. Is anyone arguing with the church's teaching today on saturated fat and refined sugar, as far as you can tell? No. Does the church have a teaching on saturated fat and refined sugar? It's not in the catechism, except to say we should be prudent about what we eat because we don't want to not be good stewards of our health. Here's my point. There can be no joy. Remember, let's go back to what we were talking about. Christ came to share our joy, his joy with us. Joy is the reason for the gospel. There is no joy if there aren't certain limits and boundaries. Now, it's easy when we're talking about food. No one is arguing about eating too much and getting sick. Let's think about it in terms of the power of speech. What's speech for? Tell me. Let's have some more audience participation.
Communication.
It's for communication. What else is it for? Persuasion. Talking. What else? Encouragement.
Expression.
Okay, expression. Okay, so we presume when someone's talking with us that they are telling us the truth to the best of their ability. Suppose your name is Allison. Suppose you went home tonight and you found out that I lied to you. Not that I made a mistake or I got bumped on the head and sort of lost my balance, but that I lied to you. How would you feel?
I'd be very upset.
You would be very upset. Do you have to check the commandments to find that out? No, you just know. Something wells up inside and says, that's not right. That's not right. Because we presume that when someone's talking with us, they're going to tell the truth. Now, I would suggest the power of speech is for something else. It's for forming relationships. Can we form relationships built on lies? If someone is misleading us, telling us things that are obviously not true, does that form a bond of trust? Trust is a virtue, and it's a special virtue. It has the power of steel when people live it, but it is very delicate and it's easily breached and broken. Isn't that true? So many great love stories, movies, books, operas have been written about people who have been separated for miles and decades and years and things, and yet they maintain their bond of love and they're faithful to each other, and they see each other at the end and it all works out, and everybody's hoping all the time nobody's going to fall, but they're going to remain faithful. That's an engine for a lot of literature. So trust is something that's important to us. So, we know what eating is for. Can we have chocolate cake and red wine? Surely. By the way, who invented pleasure? The devil? No. God invented pleasure because he attached it to certain things so he would do them. Like going to sleep. Like forming friendships. Like studying for your exam. Right? I teach our seminarians at home, and this is the way I start my class with them. I say, okay, look, here we can do it two ways. I can take the final exam for you and give you an A, or you can take the final exam, study hard, master the material, and get an A. Which do you want to do? So I'll put that out to you. I can do your homework and get an A for you, or you can do your homework, study hard, and get an A. Which would you rather have? The second one, of course. You'd rather earn it. Come on now. You'd rather have the satisfaction of the sacrifice and the hard work and the virtue that goes into... Katie, are you writing this up? Okay. That goes into earning the grade because you know what your education is for. So now here's my question. We know what speech is for, we know what education is for, we know what eating is for. What's sex for? You probably didn't know a priest was going to ask you that question. Babies and bonding. All right, let's do a little audience participation. Careful what you're thinking. How many people in the room have a reproductive system? Really? All right, let's examine that. Let's examine that. So, Mother Claire, who's sitting in the back there, is going to take me out. We're going to have a little something to eat after class. tonight, and my stomach is going to be able to digest that chocolate cake and red wine very well, and I'm not going to need to borrow Allison's to digest that food. Is that right? And right now, my lungs are oxygenating my blood just fine. I don't need the help of yours, and you don't need the help of mine. True? True. All right. So my body and your body can perform all the necessary, let's call them vital life functions to sustain and promote life, except one. There's something you and I cannot do by ourselves. What is that? We cannot further the species by ourselves. For that, a man needs a woman and a woman needs a man. Even in something called in vitro fertilization, which means in the glass, an egg and a sperm are still necessary to bring about new human life. So that tells us that, Katie's writing all of this down for you, that tells us, and this is a PG talk, or GP, or I don't know, it's maybe a little bit beyond G, right, for general audiences. But that tells us that there's something unique about this aspect of the human endeavor. But we know that. We know that because we're so interested in it and fascinated by it and drawn to it. It's not that we don't want to eat and sleep and study and do other things and play sports. We should do all of those things. But there's something unique about this realm. And that's why the church considers it to be something unique, something very special, and even more than that, because it involves new life, something sacred. Something sacred. That a new soul comes into being, and when that soul is baptized and becomes another Christ, is destined for eternal life. That's something sacred. Now let me say one other point here. I want to say it delicately to indicate something about what I'm speaking about here. The male procreative organs only make sense in light of the female reproductive or procreative organ and vice versa, in terms of form and function. Let's not dwell on that, but I think we can see the point. The hand, that's not true of the hand. I don't need the complement of the hand to figure out 4 fingers and an opposed thumb to know what this is for. But in the human body, Katie's going to write that down very carefully. In the human body, there's something different here. Let's not call them reproductive organs. Let's call them procreative organs, because that is actually what they're specially directed towards. They only make sense in terms of form and function when we see and understand their complement. Now, is from the standpoint of the church the only purpose for sex to have babies? How many people think that? Nobody should think that. Good. However, is it true that sex and babies are linked in a very profound way? One answer to that is, why do we have a contraceptive industry? What are contraceptives for? We would not have a contraceptive industry except for the fact that there is a link, a bond in nature, in the design of these things, that mean that sex and baby sex and fertility are linked. Now the church doesn't say, and we're going to start having some Q&A here in just a second, the church doesn't say that when married couples enter into that sacred realm, their deliberate intention has to be a child. She doesn't say that. She just says, don't disturb deliberately that natural relationship between sex and babies and get in the way of it. Actually, that's setting the bar very low. And why does she do that? Because she wants to protect us from harming ourselves and being selfish. Because in this realm, we're very prone to it. Now, when I was growing up a long time ago, we didn't have these gadgets where you can look at anything at any time of the day. I'm going to guess that in a crowd like this, there are some who struggle, perhaps, with the kinds of things that draw us down a bad road. You're in just the right place in the church to get the assistance that you need from these good priests and others to free you from something that's like a chain, that does not allow you that kind of self-possession that is necessary for self-giving. So you're in the right place. The great news of the church is this: avoid sin, it hurts you, but if you've stepped over the line, there's a way back. And when you're here, if there's been something that is not as it should be, you're in the right place. You can find your way back. When the church talks to us about the sacred activity, that sacred realm called conjugal love, she does so with reverence because she has such a profound respect for marriage and the capacity that it has not only to bring life into this world, but to populate the kingdom in eternity. And when people approach each other in that way, and understanding that, in preparation for the sacrament of matrimony, they are on the road to joy. I don't say that they won't have crosses or challenges in their life. They will. But that chastity, that chaste heart, is the one that prepares them for that self-giving. Look at it like this. We all want to be loved for who we are and not for what we can do. When I was a young boy growing up, my mother used to say, I'm not just here to cook and clean for you and make your lunch. She wanted me to love her as my mother because she was my mother, not just because she did things in the house. She wasn't a means to an end. Well, in our friendships in love, the same thing applies. We want to be respected and loved for who we are, not for what we do. And that's why the church has such profound. Okay, I've talked enough. We've got a little bit of time here for some questions, right? Let's have some. What are you thinking about? Ask hard questions and don't be afraid. Come on, I didn't do that good a job. Somebody's got a question. Why does the church father tell us this? I don't know. Katie, you have questions? Or did you get all this down? Please ask a question. Good for you.
So we talked about why exactly do you have details to why you can't have sex after the marriage?
Okay. Sure. Okay, so that's a good question. Did everybody hear it? No. Katie said, it's a question. She's not asking about herself. She said, why, if we're in a committed relationship, does the church say we should not enter into this realm? Okay, it's a very good question. It deserves a very good answer. Let's see if some of you have got some ideas about why that is. Help out. Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the things to understand is that sex is supposed to be the physical expression of the marital vows.
Right.
And to bring it out of context, it's telling a lie with your body that's meant to be a truth of the marriage.
Yes.
And it also reflects, the marital union reflects the Trinity himself, or the God himself.
That's true. That's beautiful.
Which is the whole other thing.
Okay, well, no, so two good points there. One is that the communion of love that is the Holy Trinity receives an expression here in family life. Parents, husband, wife, and child. There's a Trinitarian bond there of a kind that is, if you like, an echo or an icon. But, I'm sorry, your name is? Kathy, maybe. Jackie, I'm sorry. Wait till you get to be 55. You hear a lot of things or you don't hear a lot of things. Said that there is a language to the body in this way that's different from shaking hands with Chelsea. It's a very nice thing to shake hands with Chelsea. But it's a different thing in this realm. Now I'm going to guess, and I say this with sadness, that some of you probably come from broken homes, that there is divorce in your family history, and that is very painful. And divorce is always painful. And one of the reasons why I think it's painful is it always involves broken trust. Now, I'm not saying who's to blame and so on, but someone has put themselves in someone else's hands. They put their heart in their hands in a profound way, and something has broken down. And when there is that language of expression that's more than a handshake and something very profound, that is intensifying that bond of trust. So I'm reasoning back from something negative, which is the hurt and pain, to say that it is very special what married couples are permitted to do by the grace of the sacrament, the gift that they enjoy. So that tells us again that there's something special that is taking place, and it's in the bond of the vow. What is a vow? A vow means I promise, I unite, I bind myself to something, or better, to someone. And bind myself not knowing what the future is going to be. In some ways, that's a frightening proposition. But that's why the marriage vows are written as they are, in anticipation of what could ever come. So in a way we could say it's a protection against harm, because the commitment is not yet in that realm. The vow, the public order, within the church, within the sacrament. Now we know that people break that bond, but that sacrament is given to them to strengthen. It's easier to walk away from things. I was giving a talk in California not too long ago with a nice group of people, and at the end of it, a young man came up to me and he said, "Father, I didn't really understand a lot of what you were saying, but what you said about loneliness and people of my generation, you were right." I said, "I think there's a lot of loneliness." And I said, in this area in history, we have more physical intimacy than in any other period in history, because we have chemical contraception and we have sterilization, which remove, in a certain way, the fear or the worry about pregnancy. But we have more loneliness. I think the two things are related somehow. Disposable encounters, disposable relationships, disposable people, loneliness and pain. I'm not advocating for that. But he said, "Father, you're right. We have a lot of that I see. I wonder if you don't experience or know some of that also." The church wants to protect you from that harm, and if, again, there's been a stepping over the line, there's a way back. Does that help a little bit, Katie? You're writing all that down. Good. We have 10 minutes max. We can ask another question.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in your apostolate?
Yeah. So, in 1980, was anybody in the room born in 1980 besides me? Okay, just a few of us. That was really a long time ago. We had Star Wars back then. We had Star Wars. I think we did. Yeah, Star Wars. Remember Star Wars? Obi-Wan Kenobi. So back in '80, a very holy man, he was the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, Terence Cardinal Cook, said, the church has got to offer to people with a homosexual inclination or tendency something beside the word no. Because that's mostly what people think about when it comes to the Catholic Church and homosexuality. No, 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 no. And he said, we've got to do better than that. So he started a ministry that was a particular outreach to say, you know what, you belong to Christ. You're part of the Catholic Church. We want to help you to learn more about yourselves and to understand yourselves properly in your dignity as children of God, and to protect you from the harm that we must all be protected from, which is unchaste behavior, unchaste actions of any kind. So he began a ministry called Courage, and here we are in 2015, and I'm the executive director of this international apostolate now. We're in 15 countries. And our outreach is to help people who struggle with or understand themselves in a certain way, to know that they're loved by God, and to help them to live a chaste life. Now, some people are going to want to say to me, but Father, why can't two men or two women who love each other in a profound way make that commitment that's similar to Christian marriage when they're not hurting anyone and so on? And that's a fair question, and it's a very good question. It almost seems as though the church would be against fairness and justice and things that are important to us, not only as Americans, but as Christians. The church's position doesn't make any sense at all, except that we go back to what we were talking about in the virtues that mark out a design for human nature. We have a design with regard to truth, that we don't lie to each other. We have a design with regard to temperance, that we don't eat too much or sleep too much or spend too much time watching TV or these sorts of things. There's also a design in us deeply in our human nature, even if we don't see it or feel it, where man is made for woman and woman is made for man. Even if they don't feel that way. I understand that the feelings can be strong, but we're all members of the same human race. Then we enter into questions of what happens and why do people feel that way, and that's an interesting discussion. We'll leave that for another time. But these are God's children. They may have some confusion, and perhaps we can help them. We're not on a campaign or crusade to demonize anyone or make them feel bad about themselves. On the contrary. This is a ministry that's intended to build people up in their authentic identity of children of God and to understand themselves in that light of grace and to live that chaste life. Okay, so that's a good question. Yes, ma'am?
Can you articulate in one sentence the difference between chastity and abstinence?
Sure. Abstinence is what we're not doing. Abstinence is already just a negative. It's the restraint. And there is, with all the virtues, a restraint. But chastity is including the restraint, but it's the preparation for self-giving, according to our stated life. So a priest must live chastity not only in the sense of protecting his heart from things that could cause him to be unfaithful to his vows, and of course actions that are inconsistent with his promise of celibacy, but more than that, he has to learn how to live and give himself in a way that expresses his humanity and his priesthood. So abstinence is restraint, chastity has that aspect, but it is freedom. Freedom that comes from self-possession for self-giving. Huh? Great question. One or two more. Yes, my friend.
Do you think that the idea of saving sex for marriage ever causes young Catholic couples to rush into marriage or marry too quickly?
I think it could happen. I think it's possible. But I think when you're part of a community like this, you help each other to see the value of perseverance and honoring the other person and honoring that commitment. And when two people are committed to that together, they can do it. Now that means that they have to make very practical steps. And this would also be an interesting conversation about what is dating like and what is dating for. And what does the end of a date in particular look like? I think we don't want to do anything that starts to put us down a road that leads to a certain conclusion. And the way we do that is by remembering that we have certain limits. And the other person also may have certain limits. And so in terms of music and activities and recreation and things we're watching and dress and things like that, I think it can be done. But to answer your question, I think it's possible, but I don't think it has to be that way. And I think those people who decide that, look, we're going to strive with the church, we're going to go to confession regularly together, we're going to pray the rosary together, they're going to find on the other side of their marriage a kind of peace and fulfillment that has been worth that perseverance. And I think that's what we're advocating for. One or two more questions. We have to leave at 7, right? Yes, ma'am, in the back, please. Nice and loud.
How do you explain not using contraceptives to secular friends?
How do you explain not using contraceptive to secular friends? People are not, yeah. Well, actually, contraception is not so much a teaching of the Catholic Church as it's part of our human teaching. And I know that may sound strange because really it's only the Catholic Church that holds to things. I might try to do it in phases. If the person is pro-life or they're against abortion, I might start with explaining to them what they may not know about things like the birth control pill. The birth control pill works 3 ways, and you should all know this, and you should talk to people about it. The first way is that it fools the woman's body into thinking that she is pregnant so that she will not ovulate. The second way that it works is by, if you'll forgive me, thickening the cervical mucus so that the sperm and egg can't get together. The first 2 ways I've just described are contraceptive. They prevent at conception. But the third way the birth control works is by thinning the lining of the endometrium, the endometrial wall, the uterine wall. Why is that? Because the birth control pill manufacturers know that occasionally the body of chemistry will assert itself, the woman will ovulate, occasionally it would be possible for sperm and egg to overcome that barrier, and now you have a new life. So the thinning of the uterine wall is designed to not allow that new life to implant and begin to gestate. I would explain that. A lot of people don't know that. And that is the loss of life. How often does that happen? We are not sure. But does it happen? It does. And sometimes doctors prescribe contraceptives for women for other reasons, to regularize their cycles, endometriosis, ovarian cyst problems, these kinds of things, because they think that they will help them. That's not necessarily good medicine. And if someone is on the birth control pill for those reasons, they don't want to enter into that realm just the same because they don't want to possibly be complicitous with the loss of life. So I think I might start with that. And then I would move back to the barrier methods and things like this. Yes?
Can you quickly explain NFP for people who have no idea?
Sure. So the church does not teach that when you get married, you have to have as many children as you're physically capable of bearing. The church does not teach that. The church actually just says, respect the design of your body and the design of your spouse's body. Respect with reverence the sacred power that has been entrusted to you as husband and wife. And don't deliberately try to break apart what nature has united, which is sex and babies. So natural family planning is a way for the couple to locate that sphere of days where, assuming they are fertile and they engage in conjugal love, that they would have a child. And they can decide, for good reasons, not for selfish reasons, that maybe now is not the time for us to have another child, or to have a child because someone is ill, or there's a particular strain, or we already have several children, that kind of thing. And then that just means they don't enter into that realm for that particular period of time. Now that might sound like a sacrifice, and it is. And that's good, because that means that we are practicing self-denial. And it's always good for me to say no to me. Because when I'm saying no to me, I'm more available to say yes to him and yes to someone else. And that's really the basis of NFP. Yes, ma'am?
I was just going to add that it also,
7 o'clock, last question.
it's not really a question of how many families that
Please.
the husband also is very involved in the woman's cycle.
Correct.
Whereas otherwise it'd be like, oh, we'll just take the pill and either removed from.
I think it's a great point. I think one of the big lies of modern history is that contraceptives have freed women to do whatever they want to do. I think it's the other way around. I think it's the other way around. And men have behaved selfishly. I think they're vulnerable to that by insisting on an availability all the time that doesn't have what's called the consequence pregnancy. And that's dangerous. There's selfishness in it. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Some of you have to go to school, class. You've been a great crowd. God bless you all. Thank you.